We in the United Church have been called many things. We've been called progressive, inclusive, and liberal. We've also been called wishy-washy, lukewarm, and so open-minded that our brains fall out. We've been called relevant and in tune with the times, unorthodox and heretical, the NDP at prayer, the patron saint, the patron church of doubters. Well, if the United Church of Canada really is the patron church of doubters, then our patron saint is certainly the disciple Thomas, who, when confronted with the risen Christ, said something to the effect of, "Well, show me the money." Many of us, probably most of us, grew up thinking that doubt was the opposite of faith, the enemy of faith. And that was certainly true for me. I remember when, at the age of 12, I think I was, as I prepared for my confirmation, I had to memorize portions of the Statement of Faith, and this is going to look familiar to some of you, and the Catechism of the United Church of Canada, which presented the various points of Christian doctrine in the form of questions and answers. And in fact, in the front of this catechism book, I've written that the dictionary definition of catechism is a series of questions and answers to those questions. But of course, these are somebody else's questions and somebody else's answers. For example, what is it that gives meaning to life? That's the question. The answer, it is God's high purpose that gives meaning to our life. Question, who is God? Answer, God is the Almighty Father who made and controls all things according to his holy, wise, and good purpose. Question, what are the works of God? Answer, the works of God are creation, providence, and redemption. The fun just never ends. I don't know about you, but our preparation for confirmation, this would be back in the early 60s for me, consisted largely of memorizing the prescribed questions and answers in these books and being able to recite them pretty much verbatim in class, and then on the big day in front of the whole congregation. All of which begs the question, well, what would happen if we had a question that wasn't included in the catechism? Well, that was assumed to be a question that was not worth asking. And of course, the most unthinkable question of all would have been, is this teaching really true? Do I have to believe all of this in order to become a member of the United Church of Canada? But these were questions that one just didn't ask. I'm thinking that most United Church people would agree with this statement by American theoretical physicist Richard Feynman, who once said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." And I love the story of the person who went to their rabbi and asked the rabbi, why is it that rabbis always answer a question with another question? To which the rabbi replied, of course, so what's wrong with the question? And then there's another familiar name, Dr. Leslie Weatherhead, the prolific author and for close to 30 years, minister at the famous City Temple in London, England, who once said that any minister standing in the pulpit who is not agnostic is dangerous. Now, of course, I think we would all agree that there are some kinds of doubt that can be devastating. When you doubt that you're loved, for example. When you doubt that you're worthy. When you doubt the loyalty and the commitment of someone you trust. But in areas of faith and spirituality, doubt is not always a bad thing. A really healthy spirituality encourages us to foster our inquisitive spirits and to avoid the illusion, the arrogance, that we have final and absolute answers. There's a line in the hymn that we're going to sing in a few minutes following this message. The hymn is called, "You Tell Me That the Lord is Risen." And the line I'm referring to is a line in the third verse that speaks of the rich courage of doubt. And that's where the title for this message comes from, of course. And the line is, "Let the rich courage of your doubt bring you to fresh belief." I believe that to doubt is not a sign of weakness or failure at all. I believe that it takes courage to honestly admit doubt and to ask the questions that everybody else is too afraid or too polite to ask. Elie Wiesel went through the horror of Auschwitz. And in his autobiographical account, a book entitled Night, he describes how the sight of burning babies destroyed the faith of his childhood. "Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever," he wrote. "Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams into dust." Maybe some of us can identify with Wiesel. Maybe our faith has been shaken to its very core by some tragedy in our own lives or in the life of someone we love. That was certainly the experience of the disciples in the gospel reading this morning from the Gospel of John. They've been plunged into a real-life crisis through the loss of their friend and leader, Jesus, and the loss of their common vision for the future. Everything that had ordered their world, everything that had given meaning to their lives had been thrown into chaos with Jesus' death. They were afraid and they were unsure of what and whom to trust. They want to remain faithful, but the markers of their lives and their faith have been destroyed. When they encountered the risen Christ, we are told, the disciples believed, except for Thomas, who doubted. Doubts which come with life crises tend to emerge because old assumptions or old beliefs no longer work. They don't fit anymore. They don't make sense anymore in this new situation. People adopt a set of belief in their lives to help to organize their lives and make sense of reality. And this includes beliefs about God and about the way we are intended to live our lives. But when the reality of our lives is dramatically changed, when things happen that radically challenge our old belief systems, then this creates two things. It creates both tremendous anxiety and pain on the one hand, but it also creates tremendous possibility and potential for growth on the other hand. When a radical disconnect emerges between these old beliefs on the one hand and this new reality and new needs on the other hand, When that happens, we are forced to reassess our beliefs and to start all over again to make sense of our lives in this new world. I've had to do this over and over and over again in my adult faith journey. And I expect that we all have done that to some extent, to reassess what we really believe in the light of new experiences and new knowledge. My beliefs, my sense of what's important in life and what's not important at all, has changed dramatically from what I was taught as a child in Sunday school to that confirmation class when I was 12, to what I believed when I was ordained at the ripe old age of 24, to where I stand now, many years later. And this is exactly what happened for Thomas. And while his doubt was perhaps not comfortable for him or for the people around him, maybe it was necessary in order for him to make sense of this new normal, and in order for him to eventually declare, "My Lord and my God," which he did eventually declare. The crisis, the resultant challenges to Thomas's belief system, including all of that doubting, have all paved the way for a radical reformulation of faith. So this story obviously has something to say to us about the nature and the reality of doubt in our lives. But it also has something to say to us about the nature of community, especially Christian community like this. The early Christian community of which Thomas and the others were a part was a community that relied on a common interpretation of beliefs and mission in order to survive in what was a very hostile environment. So when Thomas refused to believe, when Thomas refused to salute the flag like everybody else, when he expressed his deep doubt, this put him at significant odds with the rest of his community. What I think is so interesting about this story for our time is how Thomas was completely accepted by the rest of the group. He's still with them at the end of the week. He isn't booted out of the movement. He hasn't been asked to leave. He hasn't been ostracized, nor has he been browbeaten into pretending that he is of one mind with the rest. Even though he has been left out of that group experience that the rest had and takes a totally different point of view from the rest, Thomas still belongs to that community. His individual needs are honored, and the community holds Thomas in the midst of his doubts and his differences. Not only is Thomas tolerated despite his profound difference and doubt, but Jesus himself invites Thomas to touch and to see without blame. Jesus invites him to honor his doubt by doing whatever it is that he needs to do in order to make sense of this new reality. Thomas doesn't have to pretend he's somebody he isn't. He doesn't have to pretend to believe something that he doesn't. He doesn't have to leave the community because of his difference. He's accepted for who he is, and in the end, the whole community is enriched by his different point of view. I, for one, very much appreciate the doubters, the agnostics, and the atheists in my life. And I'll be talking about this in next week's message. And I appreciate them because they keep me honest. Translation: they keep me from saying dumbass things that I'm not able to defend or explain, or maybe even believe myself. You know, those cliches that roll so easily off our tongues when we don't know what else to say. And when I talk about those cliches that roll off our tongues, it reminds me of a book that I read not too long ago on the recommendation of a friend. And the title of the book tells you everything you need to know. The title of the book is Everything Happens for a Reason, and Other Lies I've Loved. For those of us who have experienced significant crisis and pain in our lives, whether that's the death of a loved one, or a serious illness, or the ending of a significant relationship, for those of us whose very basic convictions and beliefs have been called into question, doubt may, in fact, be a very healthy and healing experience. So perhaps we are called not only to accept the reality of doubt in our lives, but to actually embrace and even celebrate the role of doubt in our spiritual journeys. Letting the new break in with its resultant doubts, and living with all of that mystery and ambiguity that this creates, may well set the stage for new and empowering possibilities for our life and our faith. Thanks be to God.